Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Global Career Forum, the international online recruiting event organized for the MBA students from top business schools. We welcome you to today's online meeting with Americana, and we have the pleasure to welcome for this live session our main speaker, Rafael Gonçalves, who's the Portfolio Director for Americana. As this is a live Q&A session, I do invite all participants to ask your questions in the Q&A panel, and we will convey them to Rafael. Rafael, warm welcome. Can I just please kindly ask you to unmute yourself?
Okay, already challenged by technology. Hi. Good afternoon to everyone. Well, thank you to everyone who joined and welcome. I want to make sure that it's a very informative session for all of you. Just as a background, you may see that in my title I don't have an Americana title, and the reason there is that even though I'm 100% dedicated to Americana, I actually work for the office of the main shareholder of Americana, Mohamed Alaban. And my role in Americana is to drive transformation. I'm the unofficial Chief Transformation Officer for Americana. So, I sort of selected 12 projects together with management that I will provide support on for this year and going forward. And in this office, I have a few people that are MBAs from the US that I hired last year from this forum. So I'm trying to build a more continued track record here. The opportunity here, as you might be able to better explain during the call, is to really be thrown into the fire. It's let's say, a very ambitious kind of journey that we have with the company. It's a very large company, $3 billion revenue company that operates across 13 countries between the Morocco and Kazakhstan. Half of the company is a large FMCG with strong brand recognition in the whole region. And the other half is a restaurant operator that is the master franchisee of a good number of highly recognized brands like KFC, like Pizza Hut, Hardee's, Krispy Kreme, etc., throughout the region. And the role of that we're looking at filling here, and as part of this program that I started last year, is to essentially come in and help run this transformational project with a view of expanding as quickly as possible the knowledge of the business through exposure to several different functions and geographies, but also building quickly the network with all the leadership team in the business, from the operators to the CEO level. And I have two people in the call already that have had that experience for the last, I think on average, 7-8 months in the company. And they're participating with me now in the transformation office, and they can provide also their perspective on that experience. The goal here is really to set people in for a fast-track career. For the company, it's being more than approved now that is the best way for us to build the management bench of talent. The company, as we go into this transformation journey, has a lot of gaps in terms of leadership capability in high levels in the company, which provides a lot of opportunity for quick growth of really good talents. For the future, What we're looking for is people who can take a top leadership role in the company. It's CEO or a CEO -1 level. And it's not long term like in a typical company. We're looking at a really accelerated, fast-paced program. The ambition here for the company is to become the reference in the industry. We already, in terms of size and profitability, we're already at the top quadrant anyway. But the ambition is much higher than that. It's to really grow and be top of mind for people when they think about a place to work. So that's what we're building with the company. I've been with the company for the last 9 months or so. That's when I started the journey there to set it up, this transformation office. And I can tell you how even though I have almost 20 years of career experience, how much I learned in this 9 months. And if I let the people in my team speak as well, I think they'll share a similar kind of experience. With that, I'll leave. I have Stephanie Desange, who graduated from Wharton, and Niharika Singh, who graduated from Chicago Booth. I'm actually a Chicago Booth alumni as well. To just give her them 2 to 3 minutes just to explain or show their it's hard to say explain, but to tell you a little bit about what their experience has been in the company, how are they feeling, how they look into the future. So with no further ado, I'll leave it to Stephanie first. Stephanie, could you, in 2 to 3 minutes, give us in a nutshell your experience so far?
Hello, my name is Stephanie Desange. I joined Americana in July. I graduated from Wharton Business School, and I did a dual degree at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, so I did an MBA as well. My experience has been very much what he says in terms of being thrown in. You get a lot of experience leading different projects across different areas. I was very much a finance background, and I've been very heavily involved in projects from supply chain to operations to HR. And I think the other thing is I'm actually originally from the United States I didn't have very much regional experience in the Middle East, but I've been able to lead a pilot for one of our digital platforms in Saudi Arabia. So the gamut has been across so many different types of projects and so many different types of roles, from a project manager role to advisory role. But at the same time, you're learning so much about management because you're managing people from all across the gamut, from CEOs to drivers on the ground. So I've learned a lot about people. I've learned a lot about management. I've learned a lot about cultural nuances. And I think I've definitely grown so far in the last 7 to 8 months that I've been here. Especially, I've learned a lot from Raphael. So he's been a great boss in that aspect in terms of really guiding us and leading the way in terms of our development as well. Currently, we're helping with the transformation office. I can't say this enough, just to be so early on in your career and to be in these meetings with the CEOs and COOs and to really have impact on, the projects that they're trying to undertake, and from a strategy perspective, from a development perspective. I can't explain it enough. I feel as if speaking to my friends that just graduated, there's nothing in comparison in terms of really feeling like you have an impact every single day, and you see the transformation of the company happening every single day, and you're a part of it, and that's been very, very fulfilling. Niharika, do you want to go ahead?
Hi everyone, my name is Niharika. I graduated from Booth and worked in the States in management consulting for about 2 years. Then I moved to the Middle East, so I've been in this region for about 3.5 years. Worked in consulting a bit, and then with another family conglomerate. So coming from that, I would say Americana, definitely, you're thrown at the deep end. So I would definitely reiterate all the points Stephanie raised. So very close access to key stakeholders. So on a day-to-day basis, you're working with the group CEO, group CFO, so very hands-on learning experience. There's a huge diversity of projects. So I worked in projects in Kazakhstan in looking at supply chain, then labor optimization, digital platforms, then development strategies. So that's a very diverse spectrum you get to work across. The good thing I found about this is, especially coming from a consulting background, is you're not just seeing things on paper. The goal is to drive the change. So when you say you commit to something, you have to execute it. So seeing things from start to finish. And things are happening at a really, really fast pace. And I'll say the learning curve is extremely steep. And we just kicked off the transformation office. So I think the biggest thing is you're being a part and driving that change and working with a very, very close-knit and strong team. And working with Rafael, I think it's been phenomenal. So yeah, putting that all together, it's a great 6 months till now.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, by the way, I'm not paying for them to say good things about me. But just before we move ahead, I think one thing that I didn't explain that well, but the growth touched on that is that it's really an opportunity that looks like and feels like a startup, because you own something and you need to build something out of it. And that can only be realized by you understanding and learning how do you influence people to go into a certain direction, and you're dealing with, like they said, a very diverse environment with people that have come from very different cultures, corporate cultures as well. And it's hard to start even describing how difficult that is, but the more difficult it is, the more you learn.
Perfect, thank you. So, Rafael, you've mentioned prior starting this session, you mentioned to me you recruited 3 people through the Global Career Forum last year, and right now we heard how the experience has been for Stephanie and Nuharika since they've joined. Just perhaps in few words, what can students expect after they submit an application? Are there any steps that are usual for Americana?
Sure. So what you would expect is to go through a small number of interviews. I'm completely against a long, unnecessarily prolonged process of recruiting. I believe that if we feel there's a good fit from a cultural and from an objective and ambition standpoint, and we feel pretty comfortable with the candidate, then we're willing to move ahead quickly. The position is based in the United Arab Emirates, so the company and the growth experience that they are very experienced in helping with the visas and everything. Most of the people here in the country are expats anyway, so that's the way we operate. The sort of the offer and process and everything is something that should be very quick. But at the same time, it's not a large program. There's a limited number of positions, and it's not a fixed number. It depends on the quality of the people that we interview. So we're not looking at hiring like 10 people. I think at most will be 5 or 6. And if we find talent that we think it makes sense to increase the program, we will. But in principle, we're thinking about hiring between 3 and 6 people.
Excellent, perfect. Again, just a quick reminder to the attendees, if you have any questions, do submit them in the Q&A panel. And we have a question here from Nicholas, who's asking how many of the 12 projects would a candidate, once they join obviously, be responsible for leading once at a time, and what is the established timeline to complete these transformational projects?
For sure, the girls would laugh, but it's as many as you can. The way we operate is, because you're in the middle of a transformation and you need to deliver value at the same time, we're almost like changing the tire of the bicycle while we're riding it. So part of the exercise is also playing that capacity game by ear and negotiating. And it's part also the training, which is how do you negotiate your time dedication with the project managers, right? The key thing here is just that there's the objective is not to burn people up with overwork, but also not have people bored, right? So you can ask the girls as well here. I don't think they've been bored for a minute since they joined. But it's hard to tell you the timeline and everything because these projects are priority projects for the company. They have several work streams with different timelines. The people in my team, they play mostly a PMO role in each of the projects, but they also lead some of the work streams as well.
Thank you. Question coming in from Shashank asking if the experience in supply chain or operations, is it mandatory for the role that you're advertising?
Experience in operations?
Yes.
No, I'm looking for talent. I think that's the bias here. It's, you can learn. If you're intelligent and you're talented, that's all it takes.
When you say you mentioned talent, perhaps could you elaborate on what behavior skills you would like to see from the participants?
I'll say there's three main things that I've seen throughout my career as the key points of success. I think the base is, it's the intelligence. If you're smart, you learn quickly, you adapt. And this intelligence that I mean is both IQ and EQ, right? The second one is being disciplined. So having a mindset of making the most out of the least possible, and ensuring that you're following up, tracking, and not dropping balls. And lastly is charisma. I think you ultimately need it because in order to grow in your career, you cannot be a single contributor. You need to ensure that you can engage other people and you can convince people of a certain direction and have them work towards that direction. So these three main things, which will be, ability to learn, discipline, and charisma.
Thank you. Perhaps question for Stephanie and Nuharika. Could you share with us an example of a project that you have been working on, an interesting assignment since you've joined? And maybe Stephanie, we start with you.
Hi. So I've worked on a lot of very different projects. But one of my bigger projects has been labor optimization. And so I guess I didn't give my background. So I did. I'm actually banking background. So I did investment banking, asset management, and private banking for 5.5 years. So I had no experience with operations. And one of the things, as we've talked about, is how do you create change mindset in terms of how do you deploy your labor force the most effectively and efficiently. So I think it was very much of a learning period for me because I had to spend a lot of times at different stores with our brands and observing all the key tasks from opening to closing shifts, trying to understand what are the different areas that need to be staffed, where are your bottlenecks, how do you kind of address the capacity constraints, how do you increase your throughput. So all these conceptual things that you learn in your classroom, I had to apply day to day. And then I also had to create a lot of the training material and a lot of the user guides and even actually the implementation of the process. So it ran from theoretical to execution to implementation. So it was like the entire gamut of labor optimization. And so now my project for the transformation office is to continue doing this for all the brands. So I was able to focus on one, but now it's seeing it through and trying to like do that for across the gamut of all the major brands currently in our portfolio.
Thank you. Nuharika, maybe you share with us some more as well.
Sure. So going off Stephanie's point, I think what's interesting is, you know, when we started our induction program, the first 3 weeks we actually spent within the restaurant. So, you know, understand the operations, being a part of the team. So back of the house, in the middle, in the front of the house. So going to someone's point earlier about experience in operations supply chain, and what Rafael pointed out, you know, you need to have the ability, the discipline, and the charisma. Like, everything is taught. So, you know, you go straight in the deep end, and it's a process. The project I'm focusing on right now is part of the transformation office, looks at the development strategy for all the brands. So we own, I'll focus on the restaurant side. So these brands include Pizza Hut, KFC, Hardee's, Krispy Kreme across the region. So essentially, it's understanding where to open the next store, how should we go about it, streamlining the process. So pipeline, site selection, the feasibility studies, looking at where competition's growing, which brands should we focus on, and then actually executing it as well. And the big thing about all of these transformation projects is an aspect of change management, because you're working with an organization to drive in such new ideas, processes, reorganizing teams. That's a huge focus for every project out here. So yeah, this is one of them. And then of course when you start off, there's the diversity, but this is one I'm focusing on for now.
Thank you. Rafael, you mentioned in the beginning, in the intro, a few objectives, plans for the future of the company, but I wanted to ask you, what gets you most excited about the company's future?
Well, I think, you know, apart from, you know, growing in size and acquiring other companies, building new businesses, I think what gets me more excited is building a company culture, a new company culture that will essentially have the best people in the organization. And I'll tell you, from my perspective, having, I can tell you, out of school, I was pretty sure in my mind that I would be better fit for investment banking, which I did, or private equity, which I also did, or consulting, which I did over the summer, because in my mind, those would be the environments where I would find the most dynamic, intelligent, driven people. And that's how I would learn and develop myself. And I had a very dim view of the corporate world. I thought that it was, you know, too structured. That I would sit in my desk in a cubicle, and everybody around me would be lower energy, and the tendency of the human beings to revert to the average. And to my surprise, when I decided to move on to the corporate world, I moved to a company that I knew wasn't going to be like that, and I expected some drop in the level and quality of the organization from a people standpoint around me. And to my surprise, it was actually the other way around. I worked for 10 years in AB InBev, and I can tell you it was a big school for me. I learned more for example, in the 3 years I was CFO of Labatt in Canada, then the rest of my career entirely outside of AB InBev. So I fully understand the value of being surrounded by the best people and feeling that buzz in the air when everybody's aligned to a certain direction and are able to accomplish. And then what you want in your career at the end of the day is to be able to look back and see what you've delivered, not only from a milestone standpoint, or I build this business, etc., but looking at the people you worked with and telling yourself, you know what, I had a role in that person's career, and they are where they are today because I was able to help. And for me, in my career, nothing provided more satisfaction than that.
Thank you. Interesting point that you mentioned at the beginning, the culture, so the company culture that gets you excited. What I wanted to ask Stephanie Niharika is, how would you describe the company and team culture? And maybe we start with you, Niharika.
I would say for the company culture, it's very diverse. So you'll find all kinds of people, work ethics, like Rafael mentioned, not just nationalities, because you're living in a country where 90% of the population is expats. So you have different styles of working, different backgrounds, to the diversity. Second, I would say a strong point of this is because with this diversity, you know, the change management part is a huge thing. So again, the drive, motivation, if you find the right people, there's a lot of that as well. And especially within our team, I think everyone's excited to change, and there's scope to grow so much. Keeping that goal in mind, there's a lot that you can do.
Thank you. Stephanie, anything to add on that?
I think my experience is very different because I'm from the West, and I feel like most of my career I've worked in New York City or London, and so I'm used to a different culture. And I think what I've realized is like there's a little bit, I still feel like in some aspects this is a developing country, and it's very, very new in terms of its timeline. I mean, I think the UAE is like about 40 years around there, and so I think that in terms of like the culture, it's still being built. And I think that what I said to my class when they visited at Wharton, was that what happens is a lot of people who come from the West tend to stay in the West, and they keep their intellectual capital there. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to embark and teach a lot of the cool things that you've learned from schools, especially from the West, as this is a developing country and they're trying to learn new things and new ways of doing things and like formulating different cultures in terms of how do you influence, in terms of leadership, in terms of those different styles. So I say that it's still changing, and I don't know if I have like a complete picture of where it is currently, but I can feel it changing to where Rafael wants it to be in terms of innovative, in terms of people really wanting to learn and really trying to be thirsty about that, and trying to really embrace change. And I think that's really what is happening at our company. And I think that it's definitely different because I think when you go into a lot of these companies in the West, a lot of that culture is already established, and this is still happening, and it's still growing, and you feel it a little bit more and more every day. So I think that's what I would say in terms of the culture, is it's still developing, but those are the main characteristics that I'm seeing in terms of the culture that's being created.
You know, I would add on something to it is it's kind of like a cloud, and you make it into a grid, and we're bringing that structure in. And one more thing which you know, there's a lot of emphasis on is an ownership mindset. So kind of owning what you want and delivering it from start to finish is the best quality product.
Thank you both. Rafael, perhaps just a few quick questions from the audience as well. Britton is asking for the position that you are recruiting for, are you looking for a current MBA student or a recent graduate?
No preference. I think Niharika is a good case here to show that you know, she had been a graduate for a few years, and she's part of the program.
Excellent. And then in terms of years experience, there's a question coming in from SPA asking if someone with 8 to 10 years experience, would this role be suitable? And if not, who could they contact at Americana directly?
No, you can get in touch with me. I think if you have graduated for 8 to 10 years, it doesn't disqualify you by any means. But if you have a specific experience and interest in a certain function or aspect of the company, and you'd like to be considered for that, it's something that we can explore as well.
Excellent. So this is actually all the time that we have today. Perhaps just any last minute recommendations to the attendees? Rafael, perhaps any advice for the future applicants?
I think what I will tell you is in any opportunity that you're interviewing for, try to understand who you'll be working with. That is key for your success. It's not at the end of the day, as you grow in your career, you're going to notice that it's a lot less about the actual company you're working for or the actual task or role that you have, but a lot about who you're working for. I'm not saying just your boss, but also your team and the people around you. That's who you're going to learn from, and who are going to provide you the path to self-development from your career standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rafael. And I would also like to thank Stephanie and Harika, the three of you, for your time, for being with us here today in this session, the Global Career Forum. And as promised, the recording of the session will be on the event website later today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.